Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. The British Prime Minister announces a 4-point plan to support Ukraine and help them plan for peace, calling on Europe to provide the heavy lifting. President Zelenskyy thanks the US for its support following that fiery exchange in the Oval Office as he warns Russia to stop targeting Ukraine if they want talks. Cryptocurrency prices rise as President Trump announces a new US strategic reserve. And Anora bags 5 gongs, including Best Picture, Best Director and Best Actress at this year's Academy Awards. To our top story, and the UK Prime Minister has announced a 4-point plan to support Ukraine in ending the war against Russia. So Keir Starmer announced a coalition of the willing a day after Zelenskyy's meeting at the White House. Starmer called a summit of 18 leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, to step up their efforts.
The discussions we've had today, particularly the coalition of the willing, is on the basis that this is a plan that we will work with the US and that it will have US backing. So that is the purpose of the plan, and that is why I spoke to President Trump last night before we developed the work on this plan. The whole point of a guarantee for any deal, or if there is a deal, is to preserve the peace. And if you want to preserve the peace, you have to be prepared to defend the peace. So the reason I've been forward-leaning on this is because I want to avoid conflict, because I do not want conflict in Ukraine, in Europe, and certainly not in the United Kingdom.
We can now go live to London to speak to our correspondent, Olly Barratt. Olly, hello, I hope you're doing well. After Zelenskyy's fiery meeting at the Oval Office on Friday, let's be honest, Keir Starmer seems to have come out of this as the diplomatic hero. Tell us what is included in his 4-point plan.
Well, Leigh Ann, certainly Keir Starmer is trying to present himself as a key diplomatic figure here. He wants the UK to be this so-called bridge between Europe and the United States. And after that fallout in the talks with Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Donald Trump on Friday, Keir Starmer was very quickly onto the telephone with both Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy. He spoke to President Trump again over the weekend, of course, entertained President Zelenskyy here. And in that 4-point peace plan that Keir Starmer has set out, first of all, in his words, he says we must keep the military aid to Ukraine flowing, while also, he says, keeping economic pressure on Russia. Point 2 is that any lasting peace, he says, must guarantee the sovereignty and security of Ukraine. But he also says Ukraine has to be at the table for any peace talks about Ukraine. Number 3, if there is a peace deal, he says that allies will continue to boost Ukraine's defences and deterrence. And 4th is that coalition of the willing that you were talking about, this idea that the UK and some other countries are prepared to put boots in the ground and planes in the air, according to Keir Starmer from the UK's perspective, to police any peace deal that is reached between Russia and Ukraine.
Indeed, Olly, there's also an additional £1.6 billion of UK export finances and a £2.2 billion loan for military aid. Starmer's using these profits from frozen Russian assets to fund this. Could we see this eventually happen in the United States rather than this minerals deal, which appears to sort of be on and off, on and off?
Well, on the point of the minerals deal, the UK is still hopeful that it can persuade the United States and Ukraine back to negotiations and back towards a signature on that arrangement. And when it comes to frozen Russian assets, Keir Starmer has actually just been asked about this in the House of Commons, where he's been updating British parliamentarians on the summit at the weekend and on his visit to Washington the week before. And he says that the UK is now able to use the interest on frozen Russian assets efforts to support Ukraine, but actually seizing those frozen Russian assets remains a more complicated issue, he says. And that's a similar position from some other European countries as well. We know that in the US there is a keenness, a desire from some American politicians and officials in the Trump administration for the Europeans to do much more in that regard, to use some of those frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine and try and release and reduce the burden on the United States. But as Keir Starmer has been telling his MPs in the House of Commons this afternoon, and opposition MPs as well, actually taking those Russian assets is something that's being worked on, but still considered to be legally difficult at this point.
Yes, indeed. And you mentioned Starmer said the UK would back its commitment with boots on the ground and planes in the air, but Europe must do the heavy lifting. Macron is clearly on board, but will Starmer be able to convince other European leaders despite the UK leaving the EU?
Well, there are some very different positions on this among European Union countries and non-EU European countries as well. George Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, has seemed very sceptical, for example, about sending Italian troops in that way. Poland has sounded sceptical about using Polish troops in that way. The UK and France say they would be prepared to put boots on the ground, and we understand there are several other countries who might be moving in that direction as well. But what the UK is hoping is that it can encourage European countries in different ways to boost Ukraine's defences in the event of a peace deal. And so that will, in turn, he hopes, encourage the Americans to provide some kind of backstop to the deal. That is something that the US President Donald Trump has sounded reluctant about, as have some of his closest advisors and officials. But the UK believes that if Europe can show that it is pulling its weight, then Donald Trump is more likely to provide in some form an American backstop. What that backstop actually looks like from the Americans still remains to be seen. There are various ways it could happen, various different modes that could be used. But the UK is trying to spearhead the European moves to greater defence spending, greater defence capabilities, but also commitments to Ukraine, as I say, to try and encourage the Americans that they should be providing some kind of backstop to a peace deal in that scenario as well.
Olly Barratt in London, thank you so much for joining me. Now, staying with Ukraine and asking what happens now with peace negotiations and that minerals deal with the US after President Zelenskyy left the White House following that heated discussion with President Trump and J.D. Vance and was accused of being disrespectful in front of the world's media. The minerals deal did remain unsigned. However, it's believed he's still ready to agree a deal with the US. Speaking on X, Zelenskyy thanked the US for its support. Here's what he had to say.
Of course, we understand the importance of America, and we are grateful for all the support we have received from the United States. There hasn't been a single day when we haven't felt grateful, because this is gratitude for the preservation of our independence. Our resilience in Ukraine is built upon what our partners do for us and for their own security. We need peace, not endless war. And this is why we say that security guarantees are the key to this. In the near future, all of us in Europe will share our common positions, the lines we must achieve and the lines we cannot compromise on. These positions will be presented to our partners in the United States.
I'm now joined by John Kavulich, Senior Editor for Outcome Modelling Analysis at Issue Insight. Great to speak to you again, John. So Volodymyr Zelenskyy says continued attacks show Moscow does not want to end the war with Ukraine. Is he actually correct in his analysis here?
No, because neither the armed forces of the Russian Federation nor the armed forces of Ukraine are stopping the fighting. And so to sort of equate or conflate the fact that the Russian government will say, well, we're interested in what President Trump is doing vis-a-vis ceasefire, vis-a-vis bringing the war to the end, but we're still going to continue to fight. And so, I don't take much take much from that, in that it's a demonstration of not wanting peace, because neither side wants to give an advantage to the other side until they absolutely have to. And that is why President Trump is singularly, linearly focused on the ceasefire, because for him, everything comes from the ceasefire. It's sort of reversed what people have now, which is they're talking about the peace plan, just and lasting peace, security guarantees, boots on the ground. President Trump is saying, okay, that's fine, but first they have to stop shooting at one another. And that's where his singular focus is.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it's something that Zelenskyy says a ceasefire won't work. He wants peace, and that's all he's sort of looking for. As you know, we saw that reaction in the White House and the Oval Office to both the men talking about this exact issue. But John, I just want to ask, what was your reaction to the last 48 hours since that explosive meeting between President Trump, Vice President Vance and Zelenskyy, and then the European nations really rallying around a wounded Zelenskyy?
Friday was, it has a lot of adjectives, a lot of adverbs. It's almost become a noun now. Did you get a Friday? It wasn't a good look for President Zelenskyy, and for some, it wasn't a good look for President Trump. However, President Zelenskyy went off script, and he created the moment that we all saw. All he had to do, and he was advised to do, his teams were advised. So it wasn't that, oh, no one told us that we shouldn't do this. But he was advised, go in, sit down. When the media spray, when the pool's brought in, you lean over to President Trump, you put your hand on his shoulder and you say, Mr. President, I want to thank you, thank the American people, thank the American taxpayers, thank the Congress for the support you've given us, the support you gave us before 2022 with the javelins. You've been there for us, and we're really hopeful that now that you're energized and you're back in the White House, that you're going to be with us again. And I look forward, our teams look forward to talking to you once we're away from the media and try to work on some more things that you can make happen. End of story. That's all he had to say. The media would have gone out. Trump would have been happy, but he didn't, and he couldn't. And that's why where we are. Then you move to Prime Minister Starmer, who grabbed an opportunity, to his credit, and he worked it on Saturday. They had that pre-planned gathering on Sunday, and they've created this, what we'll call the coalition of the willing. But when it comes to Europe, and when it comes to Europe actually doing something, there's always great distance between rhetoric and actually doing it. For one example, the boots on the ground component, that will cost an average of about $141,000 a year per soldier. Now, some months ago, President Zelenskyy said that in order to sustain a peace deal, to make a ceasefire work, to move toward a just and lasting peace, he was going to need 220,000 troops on the ground. That would be about $52 billion a year. And how long would they need to be there? And when President Zelenskyy and others say we can't trust President Putin, that he's violated all the other agreements that we've ever had, which is true. However, President Trump comes in and says, well, wait a minute. That was then. This is now. He's never lied to me. He has never done anything to me. Therefore, I start with him at 100%. And that's a big problem for President Zelenskyy and the Europeans, because they start with Putin underground in terms of credibility. But for President Trump, Putin's at the top of the heap. So therefore, Putin has to do something to prove President Trump wrong. And that's why President Trump is willing to say, I want the ceasefire. Eventually, I want to be able to say to Vladimir Putin at 12:01 on March or something, 2025, I need you to stop firing into Ukraine. then President Trump will go to Zelensky. President Zelensky, I want you to stop firing into Russia. They've got the ceasefire. And from President Trump's standpoint, he's almost done with it at that point because he's brought peace. Handsome young men, as he has said, are not dying anymore. So I don't know, how much Prime Minister Starmer is going to be able to move all of the rhetoric and the good feelings from Sunday into actually getting Europeans, getting a majority of the EU, a majority of NATO to actually do something.
So, John,
absent President Trump doing something.
Apologies for that. But yes, as you said, President Trump wants peace. He might also want the Nobel Peace Prize, we must remember. But Russia has reacted to the exchange for the first time. They've accused Zelensky of a complete lack of diplomatic ability. You sort of alluded to this earlier. It also says a fragmentation of the West has begun. Does Russia now have the upper hand in these negotiations, especially with Donald Trump?
I can see where you're going with that, and I can see the basis for that logic, but I would say no. President Trump this isn't a guy that's sort of Kissinger-esque or Churchill-esque in terms of reading and absorbing the history and looking at a multi-layer chess game. He's just linear, pretty straight, transactional, like a real estate guy. And so when he's looking at, what can I do? And this is a big part of the divide between, let's say, Europe and the government of Ukraine and the Trump-Vance administration. The Trump-Vance administration is saying, what can we control and what can't we control? Now, if we want a ceasefire, if that's the first stage, if that's the main building block upon which everything else will happen, the just and lasting peace, dealing with reparations, dealing with territorial negotiation, all of that stuff. First, they have to stop killing one another for however long that takes. So when he looks at that, he'll say, well, in order for me to deliver, I have to only focus on what I can control. Now, if there's a ceasefire, can Trump control the Russians rearming, regrouping, resting, etc.? No. Can he do the same thing in Ukraine? No. So we know both countries are going to use that time for however advantage they can, but he can't control it. But there's one thing that he believes he can control, and that is a deal with President Putin to stop the firing, a deal with Zelensky to stop the firing, and then it sort of pivots to Prime Minister Starmer and pivots to Europe, pivots to the European Union that, okay, guys, I've stopped the fighting. Donald Trump has given you the opening. Now, what are you going to do with it? And the result will be no one is going to be happy. And I think that's really important for everyone to remember in this. The Ukrainian government's not going to be happy with the outcome. The Russian government's not going to be happy with the outcome. President Trump's not going to be overly enthusiastic about the outcome, but he'll be happy enough to be able to take credit for it. And that's where we're going to be for quite a while.
Absolutely. John Kavulich, thank you so much for your insights. Absolutely fascinating. And I hope to have you back on the show very soon. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The UN and several Arab states, including Egypt and Qatar, have condemned Israel for blocking humanitarian aid from entering the Gaza Strip. They say the move violates the ceasefire deal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said it was enforced because Hamas was stealing the supplies and using them to finance its terror machine. A Hamas spokesman said Israel's blockade was a coup against the ceasefire agreement. A major operation is now underway in western Germany after a vehicle drove into a crowd of people in the city of Mannheim. One person is dead and several others are seriously injured. Police have cordoned off part of the city centre. The incident comes weeks after 2 people were killed in a similar incident in Munich. A 3.9 magnitude earthquake hit Hollywood as some of its biggest stars celebrated the Oscars last night. The earthquake's epicenter was in North Hollywood, a short distance from where the ceremony was hosted at the Dolby Theatre. There was no immediate reports of any damage or injuries. The US will start levying tariffs on Canada and Mexico from tomorrow, according to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. It's not clear whether US President Donald Trump will stick with the promised 25%. Speaking to Fox News, Lutnick said that the two countries had done a reasonable job securing their borders with the US, the key point of contention between the countries. Now, President Donald Trump briefly sent the prices of 5 cryptocurrencies soaring, but they are already coming back down to earth. Over the weekend, Trump said the US will start investing in cryptocurrencies, news which led to a surge in the markets. Bitcoin finally broke the bearish trend and skyrocketed back above $90,000 mark. Ethereum followed, climbing over $2,500. Writing on Truth Social, the president said a US crypto reserve will elevate this critical industry after years of corrupt attacks by the Biden administration. I will make sure the US is the crypto capital of the world. We are making America great again. For more on this, I'm happy to say I'm joined by Daniel Lacalle, Chief Economist at Trezors. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me this evening. So this investment in cryptocurrency, a promise Donald Trump made, of course, during his election campaign. He's even launched his own crypto coins. Tell us how this new US strategic crypto reserve is actually going to work, because there has been some skepticism about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think that this is basically about strengthening the US dollar as the world reserve currency and embracing the reality of independent units of currency. So instead of trying to ban it or trying to put brakes to innovation, what the Trump administration is trying to do is to make the most out of this surge in new and possible independent currencies, understanding that the environment for some of the global fiat currencies is very, very challenging, considering the fiscal and monetary issues. So the way that it would work is relatively simple. It would be to dedicate a relatively large amount of funds to a fund that would invest in those crypto assets with the idea of building the same as some other countries have, for example, with gold or with silver. So a strategic reserve that could be used in the future to strengthen the US dollar and the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, for example. Or as well to strengthen the position of the United States as the place to invest and to create hubs of crypto assets. It's basically the vision of the current Secretary of State of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, who, instead of being a radical denier or person against Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, has always understood that these are warning signs to fiat currencies. So the US dollar, as a global leader, is looking at crypto assets instead of as a threat, as something that they want to strengthen and that they want to take advantage and benefit from.
Well, the Federal Reserve backed this idea if this does happen, because we have to be realistic. We always see Bitcoin as being quite volatile, and we've seen that over the last week. Can we expect Bitcoin to keep rising? And where does this sort of leave people who are invested in it?
I think it's a very good question, because a lot of people look at the possibility of the United States increasing its position or building a position in crypto assets as something that is going to make the price of the underlying asset go up. And this is not the way it works. If you think, for example, of the strategic reserve of oil that the United States owns, that does not increase the price of oil when they're replenishing it, and it certainly does sometimes bring the price relatively lower for a short period of time when they are actually releasing those strategic reserves. And that's the objective. The objective is exactly the same. It's not to bring the price of the underlying asset up, which may happen for numerous other reasons, investor demand, strengthening of their positioning as units of measure and methods of payment, but the objective of the strategic reserve is actually almost the opposite of bringing the price up. It's basically taking advantage of when the price is not particularly high in order to build that strategic reserve and using it, if ever needed, to continue to strengthen the position of the US dollar as the world reserve currency. So, on the one hand, it is a validation of crypto assets as let's say, contenders in the monetary world, but it does not necessarily mean that this will lead the price higher, and definitely it should not. What we want, any investor actually in Bitcoin or in any other crypto asset would want, is actually for the price to go up because of global demand, not just because one purchaser, in this case the United States, is sort of inflating it artificially.
Absolutely. Daniel, just one quick question, if you've got time. Trump is hosting the first White House Crypto Summit. That's happening on Friday. And what can we expect from that? And what will investors actually be hoping for?
I think it's important for this idea that President Trump has of the United States becoming the world capital of crypto assets. It's a validation of a completely different and sometimes ignored and many times rejected new way of understanding monetary elements. We are used to talking about central banks and states issuing currency, etc. And what we are living now is a revolution that is very, very difficult to predict. But what the Trump administration seems to be wanting to do is to lead that innovation and technological revolution instead of just trying to ban it or trying to ignore it. Because if they want, and it's one of the main elements of the Trump campaign, was one of the elements of the Trump campaign to strengthen the US dollar as the world reserve currency, the leader should not be afraid of competition. And I think that that is precisely what they want to do. What they want to do is for investors globally to think of the United States as the place that defends, strengthens, and develops the crypto world instead of trying to ban it or ignore it. And at the same time, show the world that the United States dollar is not worried about crypto assets, that a leader does not worry about competition, actually allows it to thrive.
Daniel Lacalle, Chief Economist at Tressis. That was fascinating. Thank you so much for speaking to me this evening.
Thank you very much.
Now, the world's biggest showbiz stars gathered in Hollywood last night for the 97th Academy Awards. As always, it was a memorable occasion with the film Anora announced as the big winner of the night, picking up 5 Oscars, including Best Picture. Let's take a look.
And the Oscar goes to? Are they playing us off?
No.
Oh.
Well, maybe. Oh, Anora.
We made this with very little money, but all of our hearts. To all of the dreamers and the young filmmakers out there, tell the stories you want to tell. Tell the stories that move you. I promise you, you will never regret it.
One last thing, I want to thank the Academy for recognizing a truly independent film. This film was made on the blood, sweat, and tears of incredible indie artists.
Let's go live to Los Angeles now to speak to entertainment reporter Emily Evans. Emily, it was Honora's night, as we've just seen, but it also caused a little bit of an upset as its star Mikey Madison won Best Actress over Demi Moore, who had been the clear frontrunner for the award.
Yes, I mean, the thing is, Demi has been an actor and been in the industry for 45 years. So I think a lot of people are just feeling that she's been robbed due to maybe the time she's been in the industry over Mikey, that's only 25 years old. But overall, Honora was the main winner all round. So it's strange because Demi won the SAG Award, and normally whoever wins the SAG Award goes on to win the Oscar. But as I said, Honora, across the board, won everything. So it's no surprise, but Demi's fans are not happy.
Oh my gosh, I just think I absolutely love Demi Moore. I was rooting for her, but not that I'm biased at all. But Kieran Culkin also continued his award season winning streak, didn't he, for his role in A Real Pain. His speech really surprised his wife. I actually thought it was quite cute.
I mean, I don't know why his wife gets surprised, because for me, one of my favorite things of award season recently is Kieran Culkin's speeches. It's just, what's he going to do next? So yes, his wife, and they just met them on the carpet yesterday. They are just adorable as he was in his speech about her. They're like that in person, and she's just wonderful. But yes, he basically asked his wife to give him, it was a running joke that if he won an Emmy, that she would let him have another child. But if he got an Oscar, that he would get another 2 children, so 4 kids in total. And he decided to tell the whole world about it, much to his wife's amusement. So maybe 2 more kids for Kieran Culkin coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Another key moment was when Adrian Brody won his award for Best Actor, The Brutalist. But what happened there? There was a little bit of a scandal with some chewing gum.
Yes, I mean, again, Kieran did a funny moment with chewing gum at the Golden Globes, and that was kind of funny, passing it to Jessie. But he did it nicely when Adrian was going up the steps to get on stage and decided to throw his chewing gum at his partner. So I don't know, was he trying to be funny again, or was it slightly disrespectful? I don't know. I feel he could have swallowed it.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I could agree with you too. I think you should have done that. You were actually on the red carpet speaking to some of the stars, and some of the fashion was absolutely fascinating. I thought some people looked pretty amazing. Who do you think really stood out last night on the red carpet?
For me, Michelle Yeoh was just classic and beautiful in her blue dress. But I love a royal blue colour, wearing that myself right now. Also, Demi, I mean, she looked absolutely stunning. And Halle Berry, her mirrored dress was just wonderful. A lot has been said about Ariana Grande's dress, but she, to me, looked a bit like a lampshade. But I suppose that's fashion for you, isn't it? So.
Absolutely, Emily, a very pale lampshade. And there was also a special tribute to firefighters following those devastating wildfires. We mustn't forget this in the city earlier this year, wasn't there?
Yeah, and also on the red carpet before as well, what was lovely was we were all interviewing people and they walked on and everyone just started clapping. And I think it's Captain Eric Scott just went bright red, bless him. It was so because it really was an ovation on the red carpet as well. But once again, on stage, they were brought out and a standing ovation, which is obviously absolutely the least they deserve in everything they've done here in Los Angeles.
I must say something. I'm very envious of you being able to go to the red carpet last night. Emily Evans, entertainment reporter in Los Angeles. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
A reminder of our top stories. The British Prime Minister announces a 4-point plan to support Ukraine and help them plan for peace, calling on Europe to provide the heavy lifting. President Zelenskyy thanks the US for its support following that fiery exchange in the Oval Office as he warns Russia to stop targeting Ukraine if they want talks. Cryptocurrency prices rise as President Trump announces a new US strategic reserve. And Anora bags 5 gongs, including Best Picture, Best Director and Best Actress at this year's Academy Awards. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. Riz Khan is coming up next. And of course, don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. Good night.